A young black man drives a bright red Lamborghini down a quiet street. Suddenly, a white police officer pulls him over, mocking and taunting him before drawing a gun and aiming it at his chest. All he can do is raise his hands, heart pounding. But the officer has no idea. Every move is being recorded. And when the video goes viral, he'll realize he just messed with an NBA superstar. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. The distant hum of the interstate carried on the cool night air, but here on Maple Avenue, nothing moved except the occasional flutter of leaves across the asphalt. Then the sound came. A deep, throaty purr that cut through the silence like a blade through silk. Jordan Carter pressed his foot gently against the accelerator, feeling the Lamborghini respond with the kind of power that made his heart race every single time. The red paint gleamed under each passing streetlight, throwing brief flashes of crimson across the quiet houses that lined the road. At 24, Jordan had dreamed of moments like this since he was old enough to hold a basketball, and tonight that dream had finally become real. The Chicago Hawks contract sat in a manila envelope on the passenger seat beside him, the ink still fresh on the papers that would change everything. He wore his usual after-hours clothes, a dark gray hoodie pulled over his head, black joggers, and his Lucky Bulls cap turned backward the way he'd worn it since high school. In the back seat, a Hawks merchandise bag sat next to the envelope, small tokens of a future that felt almost too good to believe. The traffic light ahead glowed green and Jordan slowed down anyway because his mother's voice still echoed in his head after all these years, telling him that careful driving kept young men alive longer than reckless speed ever could. He was thinking about calling her when he saw them, the red and blue lights flashing in his rearview mirror, cutting through the darkness like angry stars. His stomach dropped, and his hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as he pulled over to the curb, the expensive engine settling into an idle that sounded too loud in the sudden quiet. Officer Travis Slade stepped out of his patrol car with the deliberate movements of a man who had done this dance 1,000 times before. Slade carried himself with the authority of someone who believed the badge on his chest made him the final word on every street corner in his jurisdiction. His eyes locked onto the Lamborghini from the moment he approached, taking in every detail from the pristine paint job to the custom rims that probably cost more than his monthly salary. Something cold settled in his chest as he walked closer, the kind of feeling that came when the world didn't line up the way it was supposed to, when young men who looked like Jordan Carter drove cars that looked like this one. "Evening," Slade said, his voice carrying the flat tone of official business as he bent down to look through the driver's window. His flashlight beam swept across the interior, pausing on the envelope and the merchandise bag before settling on Jordan's face. "Pulled you over for drifting over the center line back there. Nice car you've got here. Mind telling me where you got it?" Jordan's hands remained at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, exactly where his driver's education teacher had taught him to keep them, exactly where his father had reminded him they needed to stay during conversations like this one. He reached slowly for his wallet, telegraphing every movement so there could be no misunderstandings, no sudden motions that might be interpreted the wrong way. "It's mine, officer. Just picked it up from the dealership this afternoon. Here's my license and registration." His voice stayed level and respectful, even as his mind raced through the advice he'd heard from other players, other young men who had learned to navigate moments like this with the careful precision of walking through a minefield. Across the street, hidden in the shadow of a transformer box, Alice Martinez held her phone in portrait mode without even thinking about it. She had developed the instincts of someone who made her living capturing moments that others might miss, and something about this scene made her thumb hover over the record button. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't do anything that might draw attention to herself, but she kept her phone ready and her eyes fixed on the interaction unfolding under the streetlights. In the back of her mind, she wondered if she was witnessing something ordinary or something that would matter more than anyone could imagine, but she stayed quiet and kept watching, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. Slade examined the license with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for counterfeit bills, his eyes moving back and forth between Jordan's face and the photograph. "Jordan Carter," he read aloud, as if testing the name for authenticity. "Says here you live over on the south side. Long way from home, aren't you?" The question hung in the air like smoke, carrying implications that went far beyond simple geography, and Jordan felt the familiar weight of having to prove he belonged in places where his presence was questioned before his intentions were ever considered. "Just driving around, officer," Jordan replied, keeping his voice steady even as his pulse quickened. "It's been a good day, and I wanted to enjoy the car for a while before heading home." He didn't mention the contract, didn't explain about the Hawks or the celebration dinner he'd had with his agent or the phone calls he'd made to his family to share the news that would change all their lives. Sometimes, he had learned, the truth was a luxury that young black men couldn't afford to share with everyone who asked for it. The officer's flashlight beam continued its journey around the car's interior, lingering on details that seemed to fuel whatever suspicions were already growing in his mind. Alice adjusted her grip on her phone and held her breath, sensing that she was watching the beginning of something that wouldn't end with a simple traffic stop and a polite goodnight. The red Lamborghini sat under the streetlight like a beacon, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure, drawing exactly the kind of attention that could turn a perfect night into something none of them would ever forget. Slade flipped through Jordan's license and registration with the kind of casual disregard that made it clear he wasn't really reading the information, just going through motions that would justify what he'd already decided to do. The papers rustled in the night air as he held them under his flashlight, his eyes scanning over the text without actually absorbing the words printed there. "So what do you do for work?" he asked, his tone carrying the weight of someone who had already made up his mind about what the answer should be. "How much money you making? Someone else paying for this car, or is this all you?" Jordan felt his jaw clench involuntarily, the muscles in his neck tightening as he fought to keep his voice level and his hands steady on the steering wheel. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to defend himself, to explain exactly who he was and what he'd accomplished, but the voice in his head that sounded like his father kept repeating the same advice over and over again. "Don't get angry, don't raise your voice, don't give them any reason to make this worse than it already is." "Sir, I've provided my license and registration," he said carefully, each word measured and deliberate. "Everything should be in order." The officer's eyes moved from the papers to Jordan's hoodie, and something shifted in his expression, a kind of cold amusement that made Jordan's stomach turn. "That's an interesting outfit for someone driving a car like this," Slade said, gesturing with his flashlight toward Jordan's dark clothing. "Most people dress up a little when they're showing off their new ride. This hoodie look work for you in the suburbs?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond fashion choices, and Jordan felt sweat beginning to form on his palms despite the cool night air. Across the street, Alice had opened her TikTok app without consciously deciding to do so, her fingers moving through the familiar motions of going live while her mind stayed focused on the scene unfolding in front of her. The viewer count started at 0 and climbed slowly, 15 viewers, then 50, then climbing past 100 as people stumbled across her stream and decided to stay and watch. She kept her phone steady and her mouth shut, letting the video speak for itself as comments began to appear at the bottom of her screen. "Here we go again," someone typed, followed quickly by "Stay safe, girl, and this is why I don't drive at night." Alice felt her heart rate increasing as she realized that what she was witnessing was being watched by hundreds of strangers, all of them understanding exactly what was happening even though nobody was saying it out loud. A young man walking down the sidewalk on the opposite side of the street slowed his pace as he noticed the traffic stop, his head turning toward the red Lamborghini with the kind of recognition that comes from seeing someone familiar in an unexpected place. He squinted through the darkness, trying to make out the face of the driver, and Alice could see the moment when realization dawned in his expression. "Is that—" the young man started to say, his voice carrying across the quiet street, but then he stopped himself, uncertainty replacing recognition as he looked at the police officer standing beside the car. He stood there for a long moment, caught between wanting to confirm what he thought he was seeing and not wanting to get involved in something that was clearly more complicated than a routine traffic stop. Slade's attention sharpened as he heard the pedestrian's interrupted comment, his eyes moving from Jordan to the young man and back again with the kind of predatory focus that suggested new possibilities were forming in his mind. "People seem to know you around here," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "That's interesting, considering you told me you were just driving around." He folded the registration papers and tucked them into his shirt pocket without offering to return them, a small gesture that carried enormous weight in the context of everything else that was happening. Tell you what, why don't you step out of the car and open up that trunk for me? Let's see what else you've got in there. The request came out sounding like an order rather than a suggestion, and Jordan felt his heart begin to pound against his ribs as he realized that this was the moment when everything could go very wrong very quickly. His hands were slick with sweat now, and he had to concentrate to keep them from shaking as he considered his options. Every lawyer he'd ever spoken to, every older player who had given him advice about situations like this, had told him the same thing about consent and searches and knowing his rights, but all of that legal knowledge felt useless when faced with the reality of a police officer who had clearly already decided that Jordan was guilty of something, even if nobody was quite sure what that something was supposed to be. The young pedestrian took a few steps closer, his curiosity apparently overriding his caution as he tried to get a better look at what was happening. Alice noticed his movement and adjusted her phone angle slightly, making sure she could capture both the traffic stop and the growing audience of people who were beginning to pay attention to what was happening under the streetlights. Her viewer count had climbed past 200 now, and the comments were coming faster, a stream of reactions and observations from people who understood the significance of what they were watching even through a small phone screen. I asked you to step out of the car, Slade repeated, his voice carrying a new note of authority that suggested Jordan's hesitation had already been noted and filed away as suspicious behavior. We can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way, but we're going to do it one way or another. The threat was subtle but unmistakable, wrapped in the kind of bureaucratic language that police officers used when they wanted to make it clear that compliance wasn't really optional, no matter what the law might say about probable cause and reasonable suspicion. Jordan looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror and saw fear staring back at him, the kind of raw terror that came from realizing that everything he had worked for, everything he had built, could disappear in the space of a single misunderstood gesture or poorly chosen word. The Hawks contract sat on the passenger seat beside him, a reminder of the future that had seemed so certain just hours ago and now felt as fragile as spun glass. He took a deep breath and reached for the door handle, knowing that once he stepped out of the car, he would be crossing a line that he couldn't uncross, entering a space where his success and his achievements and his carefully built reputation would mean nothing compared to the color of his skin and the assumptions that came with it. The glow from the patrol car's lights washed over the red Lamborghini, filling the quiet street with blue and red flashes. Jordan sat still with his hands on the wheel, his chest tight and his throat dry. The night air felt heavy through the cracked window. He remembered his lawyer's number saved in his phone. The idea of calling now pressed into his chest with the same urgency as the beat of his heart. He thought about the envelope on the seat beside him, the contract, the proof that this car was not stolen, that his story was real. His eyes shifted for a moment toward the passenger seat. His fingers twitched as he decided to reach. Slowly, carefully, he leaned down toward the space between the seat and the console where his phone had slid when he braked earlier. "Stop right there, what are you doing with your hand?" Slade's voice exploded into the night with a sudden crack. Jordan froze, his head jerking back toward the window. He hadn't even touched the phone yet. His hand hung in the air, halfway down, as if suspended between two choices that could both ruin him. He opened his mouth, but before he could explain, the sound of metal scraped in his ears. Slade had drawn his gun, the weapon pointed straight into the car, the barrel level with Jordan's chest. A sharp click cut through the hum of the engine as Slade pulled back the slide. Jordan's body reacted before his mind could form words. He flinched, his shoulder rising, his foot pressing into the floorboard. His hands shot up above the wheel, fingers spread wide. "No weapon," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No weapon." Slade stepped closer, the gun's muzzle now inches from the window frame. He tapped the barrel against the metal door frame twice, the sound sharp and deliberate. "Back up against your seat," he ordered. "Hands higher, higher." Jordan pressed himself back, his spine flat against the leather seat. His arms trembled from holding them up, but he kept them raised as high as he could manage. Across the street, Alice tightened her grip on her phone. She crouched lower against the metal of the transformer box, her heart pounding so loud in her ears that she almost worried the microphone would pick it up. Her camera stayed steady, pointed directly at the scene. On the screen the image was clear, the officer's gun pointed at Jordan's chest, Jordan's hands raised, his face rigid with fear. The live counter on the TikTok app ticked upward fast. 200, 400, 800. Within moments, over 1,000 people were watching, typing into the flood of comments that streamed up the screen. He's going to shoot. Hands are up. Why the gun? Stay calm, brother. Stay calm. Somebody call 911 and ask for a supervisor. Alice swallowed hard, her thumb shaking over the phone. She wanted to shout, to scream, to run into the open and beg them to stop. But she stayed hidden, knowing that if the officer noticed her, the camera might go dark and the proof would vanish. Slade moved the gun closer, then pulled it back a few inches, like he was testing his own resolve. His breathing grew louder, his chest moving with short, quick pulls of air. He looked at the phone on the seat, and then back at Jordan. "Turn your head to the left," he commanded. "Now to the right." Slow. Jordan obeyed, moving his head with careful precision. His neck muscles felt rigid with tension. "Thought you were reaching for something," Slade said, his voice carrying the edge of fear that often came disguised as control. "People like you always have something." Jordan's throat tightened. When he spoke, his voice carried more than fear, it carried truth. "This is how we live," he said quietly, his eyes still fixed forward. "This is what you don't see until a camera shows it." The words hung in the night air, simple and devastating. A teenage boy on a bike had stopped behind a parked sedan, gripping the handlebars tight. Marcus, 16 and wearing a Hawks jersey under his jacket, had been on his way home from his friend's house when he saw the traffic stop. He knew that car, knew that face from the news just hours earlier. "That's Jordan Carter," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking with nerves. "He's the new Hawks rookie." He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and started recording, zooming in on the Hawks cap that had fallen to the ground. The shout startled Alice. She had been focused on the tight frame of the gun and the raised hands. She pulled her second phone from her pocket with a quick motion and opened her sports app. The top story on the screen showed the photo from the afternoon, Jordan in a suit shaking hands with the head coach, the Hawks backdrop behind them. She brought that phone up into the edge of her live shot, so both images sat side by side, the handshake in daylight, and the man with his hands up at midnight. Her viewers flooded the chat at once. "That's him. Same jacket, same face. Freeze frame this. Do not stop filming." Slade's attention sharpened as he heard Marcus's comment, his eyes moving from Jordan to the young man and back again. "People seem to know you around here," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Famous doesn't mean innocent." He stepped back slightly, then moved forward again, the gun never lowering. "Turn around in your seat. Face the back window." Jordan's heart began to pound against his ribs as he realized that each new command was making this worse, not better, but he had no choice. He turned slowly, his hands still raised, now facing the back of the car where his Hawks merchandise bag sat as silent testimony to who he was. Marcus moved closer on his bike, his camera focused on the scene. "Sir, please, he didn't do anything. He was on the news today. He's a basketball player." "I don't care if he's the president," Slade snapped, not taking his eyes off Jordan. "Turn back around. Face forward." Jordan obeyed, each movement careful and deliberate. The gun followed his every motion. Alice's viewer count had climbed past 2,000 now, and the comments were coming faster, a stream of reactions and observations from people who understood the significance of what they were watching. More than one message repeated the same words: "The whole world is watching." Jordan's arms began to ache from holding them up for so long, but he did not dare let them drop even an inch. His chest rose in shallow breaths. "The contract means nothing if I don't live through this," he thought. "Everything means nothing if it ends here." Slade's finger remained near the trigger guard. The weight of the moment pressed into every muscle in Jordan's body. His lips parted again, the words raspy. "Please, I haven't done anything wrong." The air between them felt charged, each second heavier than the one before. Alice's camera captured every bead of sweat rolling down Jordan's temple, every twitch in Slade's hand, every shadow cast by the flashing patrol lights. Her audience had doubled again, the comments rolling too fast to read. The sound of multiple sirens filled the night air, growing louder by the second. A patrol supervisor's car arrived first, followed by 2 more units. The reason was clear. Alice's live stream had exploded across social media, and hundreds of viewers had called 911 demanding immediate supervisor response. A tall man in a uniform coat stepped out with firm steps. "Slade, lower your weapon, now." The command was direct, without room for debate. Slade's jaw locked tight. He did not move at first. The gun stayed pointed at Jordan's chest, the barrel steady, his knuckles white around the grip. His breath was sharp through his nose, the kind that came from anger, not fear. "Slade," the supervisor repeated, louder this time. I said lower it. The officer's eyes flicked sideways to the body camera light on his own chest, then to the crowd of phones raised at every angle, the reflections bouncing off the dark car doors. He let out a hard breath through his teeth and eased his arm down inch by inch until the gun was pointed toward the ground. The shift released a pressure Jordan had been holding in his lungs. His hands were still raised high, but his chest finally expanded with a long, uneven breath. The supervisor moved closer, keeping his eyes on Slade. "You will report back to the station right now. This entire stop has been documented. Do you understand?" Slade's lips pulled tight, almost a sneer, but he gave a single sharp nod. His chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. He holstered the weapon with a hard shove, the snap of the latch louder than it needed to be. Before turning toward his car, Slade cut his eyes to Jordan. The look was heavy, filled with something bitter that words did not cover. His stare said what his mouth did not. Jordan lowered his arms slowly, careful not to look like he was rushing. His muscles trembled from holding them up so long, and his shoulders sagged as they came down. He leaned back against the cool metal of his car door, his head tilted slightly, and for the first time in what felt like an hour, he allowed himself to exhale all the way. Marcus, still gripping his bike handles, wiped tears from his eyes with his sleeve but kept his phone steady. "Are you okay, Mr. Carter?" he called out, his young voice cracking with emotion. Jordan turned his head toward the boy and managed a small nod. "I'm okay," he said quietly, though his voice still carried the roughness of fear. "Thank you for speaking up." Alice's phone screen still glowed in her hands. She saw the live counter climb past 5,000, then pause and settle. The comments had shifted from panic to relief, but underneath ran a current of anger that wouldn't fade quickly. She tapped to end the stream, her reflection caught in the glass for a second before the screen went black. She saved the clip immediately, trimming nothing, adding nothing. Only a short caption sat beneath it. August 22nd. Hands up, gun drawn. This is how it happens. No more words, no opinions, just the record. She hit upload, knowing the video would spread on its own. Slade stepped toward his car with stiff strides. His shoulders looked tight under the weight of his vest. He opened the driver's door with a snap, got inside, and pulled away with more speed than the situation called for. The crowd of onlookers let out a low wave of sound as the patrol car turned down the street. It was not applause, not even relief. It was the noise people make when a threat finally leaves but leaves its shadow behind. Jordan stayed by the car door, breathing through the ache in his arms. Sweat cooled on his skin, leaving a chill in the warm night air. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, not to make a point, not for the cameras, just because it stung. The supervisor gave Jordan a long, steady look. His face showed none of the sharp edge Slade carried. He only said, "Sir, you are free to go." Jordan nodded once, slow and tired. He did not answer with words. He just turned slightly toward the car window, his hand resting flat on the frame as if to anchor himself. Marcus rolled his bike closer, his Hawks jersey visible under his open jacket. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he said, his voice stronger now. "I watch all your games in college. You're gonna be great with the Hawks." Jordan looked at the boy and felt something loosen in his chest. "What's your name?" "Marcus." "Marcus Johnson." "Well, Marcus Johnson," Jordan said, managing his first real smile of the night, "maybe I'll see you at a game this season." The boy's face lit up despite everything that had just happened. "Really, I'll be there, front row if I can save up enough." Alice remained still at her corner watching the interaction. She felt the buzz in her pocket as notifications began, but she did not pull out the phone again. Her work was done. The supervisor returned to his vehicle, radio pressed to his shoulder, his eyes on the street, not on Jordan. The red and blue lights swept over the houses, softer now that the tension had thinned. Jordan bent down and picked up his Hawks cap from the pavement. He brushed off a few pieces of gravel and placed it back on his head, adjusting the brim with careful movements. The simple action felt like reclaiming something that had been taken from him. He opened the car door with slow care. His hand rested on the roof before he ducked inside. He sat in the driver's seat and stayed there for a while, not turning the key. His head leaned back against the rest, his eyes open but unfocused. The envelope with the Hawks contract still sat on the passenger seat, the team logo visible in the dome light. Jordan reached over and touched it once, just to confirm it was real, that this whole night hadn't been some terrible dream. Marcus called out one more time, as Jordan started the engine. "Mr. Carter, I'm gonna tell everyone about this. What you said tonight, about how we live, people need to hear that." Jordan rolled down the window and looked at the young man. "Just remember, Marcus, having a camera shouldn't be what saves someone's life. But until things change, maybe it's what we've got." The boy nodded seriously, understanding more than most 16-year-olds should have to. Jordan pulled away from the curb slowly, his hand steady on the wheel now. In his rearview mirror he saw Marcus still standing there with his bike, the supervisor finishing his radio call, and Alice walking away down the block. The suburban streets looked different now as he drove home. The same amber streetlights, the same quiet houses, but Jordan knew he would never see them the same way again. Every intersection felt like a place where everything could change in an instant. His phone buzzed with missed calls and messages, but he didn't reach for it. Not yet. For now it was enough to drive these empty streets, to feel his heart beating normally again, to know that he had survived a night that could have ended very differently. The red Lamborghini disappeared around the corner, leaving behind only the memory of flashing lights and a video that would soon be seen by millions. The morning light came in sharp through the blinds, brighter than it felt the night before. Jordan sat at the small table near the window of his apartment, the television on low in the background. He had not slept much. The sound of the gun cocking, the look in Slade's eyes, the weight of his own breath, it all replayed in the silence. His phone buzzed every few minutes, notifications stacked one after another. The video that Alice had streamed the night before had left her hands and moved into the world on its own. First a few thousand people had seen it. By the time the sun rose, the number had climbed into the hundreds of thousands. By breakfast hours, it was in the millions. He saw the same clip on news channels, on sports networks, even in the morning roundup segment, where anchors usually talked about weather or community fairs. Jordan picked up his phone once, swiped through, and set it back down. He did not need to read the comments. The headline said enough. Rookie NBA player held at gunpoint in traffic stop. Video of Jordan Carter sparks national outcry. Police announce internal investigation. The official statement had already been issued. Slade was suspended, pending a full internal review. The papers read the words straight off the department's letterhead, showing the seal and the plain language. Jordan read it once, and then pushed the phone away. It was only paperwork, and he knew how easily paperwork could shift when no one was watching. His agent called twice before 9 in the morning. The Hawks front office had reached out. There would be a press conference, they said. The team wanted to show support, wanted Jordan to have a platform to speak if he chose to. Jordan stared at the Hawks contract still sitting on his counter, the red ink bright against the manila folder. Yesterday it had represented everything he'd worked for. Today it felt like both a shield and a target. Alice woke up to her phone buzzing non-stop on her nightstand. Her TikTok had exploded overnight, 2 million views and climbing. The comments ranged from praise for her steady camera work, to people sharing their own stories of traffic stops gone wrong. News outlets were already reaching out, wanting to license the footage, wanting interviews. She sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through the responses. This was what she did, capture moments that mattered, but she had never captured something that mattered this much. The weight of it settled on her shoulders as she realized that her decision to stay hidden and keep filming might have saved Jordan's life. Marcus Johnson barely slept either. He kept replaying the moment when he shouted Jordan's name, wondering if he had made things better or worse. His own video from the bike had been shared thousands of times, people calling him brave for speaking up. But Marcus didn't feel brave. He felt scared that it had happened at all, scared that it could happen again. By mid-morning, Jordan was on his way to the stadium. The Hawks had scheduled the press conference for 11. His agent had told him what to expect: cameras, reporters, and the need for a statement. Jordan sat in the back of the car, with his hands folded. The ride was quiet except for the hum of traffic. When he arrived, the hall was already packed. Bright lights lined the front of the room, cameras stacked on tripods, microphones pushed close together on the podium. The air carried that low buzz of voices that fill a space before something important begins. Jordan walked in wearing a dark suit. His hair was trimmed neat, and his face showed the same calm he had carried onto the court in every game. He stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone once, and looked straight at the row of cameras. The room grew still. "Last night," he began, his voice steady, "I was afraid. I thought that might be the end for me." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "I was lucky. Lucky that someone had a camera. Lucky that someone recognized me. Lucky that people called for help." He looked down for a second, then back up. His tone did not rise, it did not stretch into long lines, it stayed plain. But life should not depend on luck. It should not depend on whether someone is famous. It should not depend on whether a crowd is there to watch. The flash of cameras filled the silence between sentences. "I don't want anyone to feel they have to stay quiet with a gun in their face, just because of the color of their skin. I don't want any parent to have to teach their child how to survive a traffic stop instead of how to drive safely." He gripped the podium edges, his knuckles showing white for just a moment. "This is bigger than basketball. This is about coming home alive." The room erupted with questions, hands shooting up, voices calling out, but Jordan stepped back from the microphone. His agent moved in smoothly, ending the conference before it could become a circus. Later that afternoon, Jordan returned home. The space was quiet again. The echoes of cameras and voices faded into the background of memory. He walked to his car in the garage and slid into the driver's seat. He placed both hands on the wheel and sat back. He did not turn the key, he only stayed there, letting the silence hold him. His chest rose and fell in a long, even rhythm. No cameras, no microphones, no crowd, just breath. The Hawks cap sat on the passenger seat where he had placed it that morning, the logo catching a line of light from the garage bulb. The contract folder lay beside it, proof that his dreams were real, that last night hadn't ended everything. Jordan's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Saw your press conference. Thank you for speaking up for all of us." He typed back, "Thank you for speaking up when it mattered most." Another message came through, this one from Alice. "Your words today were important. The video is yours to use however you think will help." Jordan stared at her message for a long moment. She had given him something invaluable, evidence, truth, protection, and she was giving it freely. He typed back, "Thank you for being there, for seeing, for staying." As the sun began to set, Jordan finally started the car. He had nowhere specific to go, but he needed to drive. The Lamborghini purred to life, the same sound that had filled him with joy just 24 hours ago. He pulled out of the garage slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. The suburban streets looked different now in the evening light. Every intersection felt like a place where everything could change in an instant, but Jordan drove with purpose. He wasn't just a basketball player anymore. He was a symbol, a survivor, a voice. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders, but it didn't feel unbearable. It felt necessary. The red car moved through the quiet neighborhood, past the spot where it had all happened, past the transformer box where Alice had hidden, past the corner where Marcus had stood with his bike. Jordan drove with his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes focused on the road ahead, knowing that this was just the beginning of a much longer journey. 3 days had passed since the night that changed everything. The video had become a wildfire on social media, spreading faster than anyone could have predicted. Jordan's name was everywhere. News channels, talk shows, Twitter trends, Instagram stories. The hashtag #HandsUpGunDrawn had been used over 1 million times. Jordan sat in his apartment Wednesday morning, the same table by the window where he had watched the world wake up to his story. The television played the morning news on mute, closed captions scrolling across the bottom of the screen. His face appeared again in a split screen, next to footage from the traffic stop. The anchors were discussing the police department's response, the internal investigation, the community meetings that had been scheduled. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother in Detroit. "Saw you on Good Morning America, baby. I'm proud of you for speaking up. Your father would be proud too." Jordan stared at the message, feeling the weight of generations pressing on his shoulders. His father had died when Jordan was 15, but not before teaching him the careful dance that black men had to learn. How to keep your hands visible, how to speak respectfully even when you're angry, how to survive encounters that could end your life. Another buzz, this time from Marcus. Mr. Carter, they want to interview me for Channel 7 News. My mom says it's okay if I want to do it. What do you think? Jordan typed back quickly. If you feel comfortable speaking, then speak your truth. But remember, you don't owe anyone anything. You already did more than enough. The front door buzzer rang. Jordan checked the security camera and saw Alice standing in the lobby, looking nervous but determined. He buzzed her up. When she knocked, Jordan opened the door to find Alice holding a folder and looking like she hadn't slept much either. I hope it's okay that I came by, she said. I got your address from the news coverage. I wanted to talk to you about something. Jordan stepped aside to let her in. Of course, you want some coffee? Alice nodded gratefully and followed him to the kitchen. As Jordan poured 2 cups, she set the folder on the counter. I've been getting calls from lawyers, she said. They want me to testify if this goes to court. Civil rights attorneys, they're talking about a lawsuit against the department. Jordan handed her a mug and leaned against the counter. What are you thinking? I want to do it, Alice said, her voice gaining strength. What I saw that night, what I recorded, it wasn't just about you. It's about every black man who gets pulled over when no one is watching. Every time there's no camera, no witness, no 16-year-old kid brave enough to shout from across the street. She opened the folder and pulled out printed screenshots from her video. Look at these comments, she said, spreading them across the counter. Thousands of people sharing their own stories. Mothers talking about teaching their sons to keep their hands on the steering wheel. Fathers describing the talks they have to give their children about police encounters. Jordan picked up one of the screenshots. A woman had written, "My husband gets pulled over twice a month driving to work. Same route, same time, same reason, suspicious behavior. He leaves 20 minutes early now just in case." This is bigger than one bad cop, Alice continued. This is about a system that sees a young black man in an expensive car and immediately assumes criminal activity. Your video is proof, Jordan. Clear, undeniable proof. Jordan set down his coffee cup and looked at Alice, really looked at her. She was maybe 5 years older than him, with tired eyes that had seen too much but still held hope. She had risked her own safety to document his, and now she was willing to risk more to make sure it mattered. The lawyers say we have a strong case, Alice said. Not just against Slade, but against the department's training, their policies, their failure to address racial profiling. They're talking about pushing for real reform, not just suspensions and paperwork. Jordan's phone rang. The caller ID showed his agent's number. I should take this, he said to Alice, then answered, Hey Marcus. Jordan, we need to talk. His agent's voice was tense. The team's getting pressure. Some sponsors are nervous about the controversy. They're asking if you might consider toning down the messaging. Jordan felt his jaw tighten. Toning down what messaging? Asking not to be shot during traffic stops. Look, I'm on your side here, his agent said quickly. But they're worried about alienating certain fan demographics. The Hawks play in a conservative market, you know. Maybe we could focus more on unity, bringing people together, less on the racial aspects. Jordan looked at Alice, who was pretending not to listen, but obviously hearing every word. He thought about Marcus, the teenager who had shouted his name in the darkness. He thought about his father, who never got to see his son make it to the NBA. Marcus, Jordan said into the phone, set up a meeting with the team executives. Not about backing down, but about moving forward. I want to know if they're going to stand with their players, or if they're going to fold the first time things get uncomfortable. After he hung up, Alice smiled. That sounded like the right answer. Jordan sat down across from her at the table. I've been thinking about what you said. About this being bigger than one night, bigger than one cop. I want to be part of whatever comes next. Alice pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. This is the lawyer I've been talking to, Sarah Chen. She specializes in police misconduct cases, but more than that, she pushes for systemic change. Policy reform, training overhauls, accountability measures. Jordan picked up the card and studied it. What would this mean? Really, it means depositions, court appearances, media scrutiny, Alice said honestly. It means reliving that night, over and over. It means some people will call you a troublemaker, an activist, someone who should just shut up and play basketball. She leaned forward, but it also means using your platform for something that matters. It means the next Jordan Carter who gets pulled over might not need a camera and a crowd to survive the encounter. Jordan thought about the text from his mother, about the pride in her voice when she called him brave. He thought about Marcus, ready to tell his story to the news cameras. He thought about the thousands of comments Alice had shown him, all those people sharing their pain and their fear and their hope. Okay, he said simply. Let's do it. Alice smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since the night they met. There's something else, she said. I want to start a foundation, using the attention from the video, the platform we've been given. Something focused on police accountability and community safety. Jordan raised his eyebrows. You've been busy. I couldn't sleep, Alice admitted. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw you with your hands up, saw that gun pointed at your chest. I kept thinking, what if I hadn't been there? What if I hadn't decided to film? I can't change what happened, but maybe we can change what happens next. Jordan stood up and walked to the window. The street below looked normal, peaceful. Cars drove by at the speed limit. People walked their dogs. Children rode bikes on the sidewalk. It was hard to believe that just a few blocks away, 3 nights ago, his life had almost ended. What would you call it? He asked. The foundation. Alice was quiet for a moment. Then she said, hands up. Simple, direct. Everyone knows what it means now. Jordan turned back to her. Hands up foundation. I like it. What would we do? Body camera, accountability programs, community oversight of police departments, legal support for families affected by police violence, education programs about civil rights and police interactions. Alice's voice grew stronger as she talked. And we'd use your platform, your visibility, to make sure people pay attention. Jordan sat back down, feeling something he hadn't felt since the night of the traffic stop. Hope. Not just for himself, but for something bigger. There's one more thing I want to do, he said. I want to meet with that kid Marcus. Not for the cameras, not for a PR opportunity. I want to thank him properly, and I want to ask him to be part of this too. Alice nodded. The 3 witnesses, the victim, the recorder, and the voice that spoke up. That's powerful symbolism. Jordan's phone buzzed with another text, this one from an unknown number. Saw your press conference. As a father of 2 black sons, thank you for speaking up. You're giving voice to something we've all felt, but couldn't say. Detective James Washington, Chicago PD. He showed the text to Alice, who read it, and looked up with surprise. Even some police officers are supporting this. Not all cops are like Slade, Jordan said, but the system protected Slade until a camera forced their hand. That's what needs to change. Alice gathered up the papers and put them back in the folder. So we're really doing this. The lawsuit, the foundation, all of it. Jordan thought about the contract sitting on his counter, about the basketball career he'd worked his whole life to achieve. 3 days ago, that contract represented his entire future. Now it felt like just one part of a much larger story he was meant to tell. Yeah, he said, we're really doing this. As Alice prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Jordan, what happened to you wasn't fair. But what you're doing with it, what you're choosing to build from it, that's going to matter for a lot of people. After she left, Jordan sat back down at his table and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for Sarah Chen, the civil rights attorney. Before he could change his mind, he hit call. Miss Chen, this is Jordan Carter. I think we need to talk.